Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for joining this month's session. We've been waiting eagerly for the session for this month as we have wonderful speakers joining in. And I'm so glad that we have Carolyn Wong joining us. And we will be discussing about varied topics today, starting with DevSecOps, SQL injection, and risk and privacy or privacy by design. So these are three diverse topics, and we will take up questions post the session, so you can keep posting in the chat box anytime you have questions or you want to discuss something. I'll be able to facilitate it and help you. Apart from that, I also want to give you a few highlights from the past month that we have done. Last month we did the session with few speakers, and you have the videos available. Also, we were available at Global AppSec Tel Aviv, and we did a training. There were a lot of diversity speakers there, and in the training we had over 40 women who joined us and learned web app security. Apart from that, we saw that the organizer had called a lot of amazing women speakers on the show or on the conference. Apart from that, we had a women in AppSec lunch wherein it it was facilitated by women, but they were all inclusive. So it's more on the diversity and inclusion. It's not just women. Now I would actually like to give it to Carolyn so that we can go ahead and start the session. And I would like her to introduce herself. And people know, but still, it'll be amazing to hear from her.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be asked to join this. And it's very exciting for me to be able to connect with this group of women. My name is Caroline. I'm currently the Chief Security Strategist at a company called Cobalt.io. We are a pen test as a service company. I started my information security career 14 years ago. In 2005. So before that, I had studied electrical engineering and computer science at UC Berkeley. And for this group, I'll share a little story, which is when I was 16 years old, my father asked me, "What do you want to study when you're in college?" And I said to him, "I would like to study dance or psychology." And he said, "You're going to study engineering and you're going to attend the best engineering program you can get accepted into." And so, I tried it, and it turns out I'm actually quite a mediocre engineer. I think that the two speakers who will be following me are much more technical experts than I am myself. I've never actually in my career done software engineering. But I do at least understand some of the basic concepts. And then the skills that for me have enabled me to remain in this field have been my project management skills, organizational skills, communication skills. So I share that with you because in my case, as in many different cases, I think there is a lot of value to different skill sets. If you can code, and if you can code really well, of course, that's extremely valuable. But I believe that the industry needs all sorts of things. And so that's why I share that with you. I began my information security career at eBay on the global information security team. And I started out as a security policy analyst. So at the time, in 2005, eBay had two very important security compliance frameworks. One was SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, and the other was PCI DSS. In fact, at this time, PCI DSS had only been released in 2004. So at this time, it was brand new, and they needed sort of a new graduate to come and help out with these things. So I got my big break when eBay hired their first CISO, a vice president named Dave Cullinane. And he came from a bank, which was called Washington Mutual, which later, during the financial crisis, was acquired by JP Morgan Chase. And Dave was like a great guy. He actually grew the security program from a $2 million budget to a $30 million budget per year. And we grew the team together from 25 to 60. And Dave and I, we worked very well together because at the time, of course, Dave is very experienced, very knowledgeable, very networked, very technical, and really just a brilliant guy. At the same time, he's not very organized, and he mumbles when he speaks. So when he talks, it's actually difficult for many people to understand what he is saying. And so he and I made this really good team because I was very early in my career. I had very little experience and very little knowledge, but I could help him to express his ideas and I could help make them happen. And so I was very fortunate to study under Dave's leadership. And then at this time, I was doing a long commute. I was living with my parents in San Francisco, and I was driving to San Jose. So at that time, it was like 1 hour drive each way. Today, I think it's a bit worse. Today, maybe it's 1.5 or 2 hours drive each way for that same commute. But anyway, I got sick of it. So I decided to take a job that was closer to my home. And this was at a company called Zynga. Zynga is most famous for their Facebook games, the most famous of which is called Farmville. And Farmville was actually very amazing in that they went from 0 to 10 million daily active users in just a few weeks. So there was this phenomenal growth. It was an early adopter, actually, of AWS Cloud. And for them, it was just perfect because whenever Zynga would launch a new game, they did not know if it would be wildly successful and if they would need a lot of infrastructure or if it would totally flop and they wouldn't need any infrastructure at all. So for them, the cloud gave exactly the elasticity that that business model needed. And so from a security perspective, I had the opportunity to learn from that. Since that point in time, I have had a variety of different roles. If you had asked me, well, let me put it this way. As a 16-year-old girl, I did not, am I still connected? I hope I'm still connected. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully I'm still here. And hopefully you guys can still hear me. Let's see.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I just I want to make sure because sometimes you know how the internet is. So what was I going to say? Only that before I began my career, I did not realize that in today's world you can actually change your job many times. And so of course I've changed my job many times. And so I went to Symantec and I did some product management there. I went to Cigital, which later got acquired by Synopsys, and I did some management consulting there. And then I started at my current role at Cobalt in September of 2016. And it has been a lot of fun for me to try different types of work at these different types of companies. So today I'm going to talk about DevSecOps. And so I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if this will work. Application window. Yes, share. Okay. So I will do it this way. And I think if I click present, then you should be able to see my slides. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So this is a talk, and the talk is called Why Does Security Matter for DevOps? And I'm also going to keep an eye on the time. So about me, I told you guys about me already. Today in this talk, I'm going to discuss why does DevOps matter and the changing role of security, why security matters, which to me has been sort of, for now, like a many years question. For years, I've asked myself, like, why does security matter? Because if this is the work that I'm doing, I want to try and understand, like, why is it that I seem to care about it and then no one else does? So this is something that I've wondered for a long time. And then, of course, what to do about it. So first things first, why does DevOps matter? Of course, we are all familiar with sort of the evolution from waterfall software development to agile to DevOps. And to me, DevOps is like what software engineering always wanted to be. You can come up with an idea for a digital experience, and very quickly, you can make it happen. I see organizations moving toward this model because, of course, it's a competitive advantage. If an organization can create some features very quickly, and if they can change them very quickly, then that is a competitive advantage. And next, of course, is how is the role of security changing? So in a waterfall model, the job of security is to prevent incidents from getting in. There is this idea that there's a perimeter, and there's this idea that, you must stand guard at the perimeter and don't let anyone in. There's also this idea about SDLC gates, software development lifecycle gates. So in a waterfall model, you have these big phases. And in between every phase, security can go in there and say, well, now we want to take a look to see what's going on. And we want to assess it, and we want to be able to request changes. And only then, when we approve, can you move on to the next phase. Of course, in a pre-DevOps model, typically you also have an on-premise data center, which is a totally different business and technology and architecture model from using the cloud, and also, typically a workforce that's located on-prem. Now, it's much different. Somebody can have an idea for a digital experience, and they can get started much quicker than they could in the past. And this is thanks to the cloud. You don't have to go and rent your own data center. You don't have to go and install your own servers. You can actually just pay someone else to do that, and you can just use it. So we can rent now. And I have this saying, which is that vendor risk goes both ways. What I mean about that is that so many software organizations are dependent on one another. My company, for example, we are a software company, and we sell to different companies, including software companies. And when we try to sell to a company, they ask us, tell us about your security. At the same time, we use other software to do our work and to create our software and to provide our services. And we ask our vendors, what is your security situation? So many software companies actually find themselves in this situation where they are both a buyer of software and a seller of software. And whenever there's a transaction like this, there needs to be a discussion about security. Another thing that's happening is because so much of what we used to focus on as an industry in the security industry, it used to be very network focused, because in a world where each organization has a private data center, it's very important to focus on network security. Now, of course, as that's moved to the cloud and as that's moving to the cloud, it's not like the organization no longer has responsibility for network security, but someone else is operationally performing those activities. So that's being done by the vendor. So for the software organization itself, what becomes very important is actually the application security and the API security. And then, of course, today, it's possible for people to do their jobs from anywhere in the world, pretty much, as long as there's an internet connection. So now, many organizations, their workforce is actually not all physically located in the same office. And of course, people are using their own personal devices, more often for mobile phones, but sometimes even for laptops, perhaps. So this really changes the job of security for a security professional. So why does security matter for DevOps? I actually have an idea that there are 3 reasons. The first reason is because of sales and acquisition. So when I talked on the previous slide about vendor risk, and I say that every software organization is typically both a buyer of software and a seller of software, at each of those transactions, there is now a question about security. So now security is in the middle of the sales process and the sales transaction. And that brings it to the forefront of businesses that sell stuff in order to do their business. Another, of course, is acquisition. So software companies, they get acquired all the time. When Yahoo, for example, was acquired by Verizon, and then more information came out about the Yahoo breach, then they actually got like a $400 million discount on that acquisition, which is, for the cost of the total acquisition, I want to say it was like 3% or something. But of course, $400 million is $400 million. That's a lot of money. And so security is beginning to matter at the point of the sales transaction, even when organizations are being considered for merger or for acquisition. Of course, another reason that security matters for DevOps companies is that companies want to avoid negative press. Nobody wants to see a news headline that says my organization had a large security breach. And if I think about that and I ask the question, why doesn't anyone want to have negative press associated with the security of their company? It's because they don't want to get in the way of doing more sales. An organization doesn't want the negative press because if they have negative press, then they might not be able to sell because people may not trust them. And similarly, if they have negative press because of a security breach, they may not be a good acquisition target, or they may not be as valuable of an acquisition target. So I would actually argue that this negative press reason, is actually just a subset of the sales and acquisition. The third, of course, is compliance. There are many types of compliance. There's regulatory compliance. Sometimes you have to follow a compliance regulation depending on your geography or depending on the type of business that you run. So GDPR, for example, if you have customers in Europe, you're supposed to follow GDPR. PCI or HIPAA is a data-driven type. So if you process payment information or if you process healthcare information, then you're supposed to follow the appropriate compliance regulations. There can be contractual compliance. You have something written into a contract about what you have to do for security. You should probably do that. And then there's also framework compliance. In order to say that you comply, for example, with ISO 27001. And then again, I ask the question, why? Why does compliance matter? And to me, it's still all about sales and acquisition. Because if an organization is not PCI compliant and it processes payment data, if it's not HIPAA compliant and it processes healthcare data, if it's not GDPR compliant and it has EU customers, then this actually will get in the way of doing sales and positioning oneself for a merger or for an acquisition. So this slide is a little bit of a joke. When I was trying to create this slide, I did a Google image search for a CISO sleeping. So the idea I was going for is you want to do security for DevOps so that your CISO can sleep at night. It turns out when you type that into a search field, you receive many inappropriate images. And so I chose instead to have this cat to represent the idea of why does security matter for DevOps? for these 3 reasons, and so your CSO can sleep at night. Here, I want to actually look at something. This is a memo from Bill Gates in 2002 to all the FTEs at Microsoft. Now, when I was working at eBay in 2005 on the security team, there was this idea that, people would sometimes say, "Oh, I wish that we were like Microsoft. I wish that our CEO would say to every employee how important security is." So for this presentation, I got a copy, of the memo, and here the text that is underlined in yellow, it actually shows me that Bill Gates made security a priority for Microsoft, not because it was like the right thing to do and not because it was a noble thing to do, but actually because it was having security problems was getting in the way of Microsoft being able to sell its products. So if I read this, over the last year, it has become clear that ensuring that .NET is a platform for trustworthy computing is more important than any part of our work. If we don't do this, people simply won't be willing or able to take advantage of all the other great work we do. So when I read that, I think to myself, Bill Gates is concerned that people aren't going to buy Microsoft products because they're insecure. And that's the reason that security becomes a top priority. So to me, it's really all about the money, right? Security in any domain is about protecting value. Physical security is about protecting value. Digital security is about protecting digital assets. Information security is about protecting sensitive information. In any case, it boils down to value and money. So, what do you do about it? Now that we've established that yes, security is important for DevOps, how do you proceed? There are many ways to proceed. If you go and you Google and you look up software security, application security, one of the things you will come across is BSIMM. But here's the thing about BSIMM. BSIMM is super cool, and I recommend that you look into it. The thing about BSIMM is it has 113 software security activities. And this can be very intimidating. That's like a lot of stuff to do. Tons of stuff to do. Another one that you might look into is ISO 27017, which is like information security controls for cloud services. First of all, it's not even free. You have to pay like 138 Swiss francs, which I converted, it's 150 US dollars. And then it has 121 things in it. So that, for many people, is very overwhelming. It can actually be very intimidating. There's another one. So you may be familiar with the Cloud Security Alliance, and they published something called the Cloud Controls Matrix. And the Cloud Controls Matrix has 133 things in it. So this is like so much stuff, right? It's a little bit too much stuff. And so what I propose is that perhaps it does not have to be so complicated. Maybe instead of more than 100 things, it can actually just be 4 things. So I came up with this model. And this model has application security broken down into 4 categories. The first one is govern. So there are some high-level factors that you're supposed to consider when you're thinking about application security. This includes things like compliance regulations, relationships with other organizations, which we talked about, and having a solid understanding of what it is you're supposed to be securing in the first place. So things like asset management and risk ranking. It's also important to define metrics so that you can define the success of your program over time. Govern. The next one, of course, is that to do application security well, you have to find security issues. And there are many ways to do that, regardless of whether you're waterfall or agile or DevOps. Security problems come in 2 types. One is bugs and one is flaws. Bugs, of course, are code level security issues, and flaws are design level security issues. And then to do application security well, you have to fix the issues. It's not good enough just to find them. The quality of the software does not improve until the problems are addressed and eliminated. And this requires effective communication and coordination and integration with development teams and processes. And finally, to do application security well, you have to prevent security issues from happening in the first place. So it's important for us to help the people who build the software understand why vulnerable code is insecure. Developers should be empowered with tech stack specific knowledge and tools to help them to avoid creating security bugs and flaws in the first place. Ideally, good programming practices and well-designed frameworks make it easier for developers to write secure software by default and harder for them to make mistakes. And then you also have to configure your cloud environment correctly. So at this point, I will actually pause for questions. So I wrote this paper, and it's like a 20 pages long paper. And if you want to find it, and if you want to find this graphic, you can go on Twitter and you can find me at Caroline W.M. Wong. WM stands for Wyman. That's my middle name, at Caroline W.M. Wong. And if you look at my pinned tweet, you will find a PDF document, which is this picture. And at the bottom of the PDF document, you will find a link to the white paper, which is like 25 pages long, and it's totally free to download. And it's just, some more thoughts on all of this stuff. So I'm hopeful that for this community, this may be potentially a learning tool, or potentially a tool to use when you're trying to communicate about this stuff to other people. So at this point, what I'll do, I will stop sharing my screen, if I can figure out how. Okay, I think I stopped the screen share, and I'm happy to take any questions, although I'm also aware that I've taken up a lot of time, and there are 2 more speakers for today's session. Vendon, you're on mute.
I know. I'm so sorry. I just do this all the time. I speak on mute. Let me just check the chat box if there are any questions in the chat box. So at the moment, we do not see any questions in the chat box. But just I have one question. When we say DevOps plus security, how can a company start that culture itself? Because this has to be embedded in the culture.
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. So I have a strong opinion about this, actually, which is that it has to be done with people. So there is this idea about DevOps, which is that automation is a huge piece of DevOps, and indeed it is. And there are ways that automation can also help security in DevOps, but culture actually boils down to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important for security professionals to get to know the DevOps people and to put yourself in those situations, get yourself invited to those meetings. Because if you can be present, and you don't have to physically be present, you can be present on a video call, just like we are right now. But if you're present for those conversations, and if you can offer security advice and consulting at the time when it is needed, then that is the way to change the culture. I think that ways that don't work so well is when you go in and you say, no, you can't do that, because then they'll just do it anyway. I think other ways that don't work is when you tell them what to do without asking them what they think. So I think actually, even though automation is a big part of DevOps, I actually think that when it comes to getting security into the culture of DevOps, it's about people, and it's about people interaction.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we don't have any questions at the moment, but I am sure there will be a lot of questions after the session that will come to you. Can you share your details where the people can reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yes. You can find me on LinkedIn. please send me a connection request and just let me know that this is the way that we know each other, and I would be happy to accept your connection request. I'm happy to take questions at any time. You can also find me on Twitter, and you can send me questions that way. So I very much look forward to connecting with everyone. And I certainly hope that people will reach out and get connected, because even if you don't have a question for me right now today, maybe you will in the future. And I encourage you to please reach out, because connecting with women in our industry is extremely important to me. And I would love to know about who are you and what are you working on and what are the challenges that you face. And I would love to learn about more, and then if I can provide any advice or a perspective or a point in the right direction, then I would be happy to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And I'm sure people will send your connection requests, and your LinkedIn and Twitter will be flooded with that.
Excellent. Wonderful. That's what I hope for.
Yeah. Great. So up next we have Paramita, and she will be giving a brief overview on SQL injection. This is her first tech talk, and she's excited. I'm excited for her. So let's cheer and welcome Paramita. So Paramita, over to you. If you can share your screen and talk about yourself, and like tell us more about yourself. What do you do? And then we can start off with the topic.
Thank you so much, Vandana. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all whoever is attending the session. And probably I'm not visible because my camera did betray me last moment. So hopefully I'm audible to everyone. And
Yeah.
today I'm going to talk about SQL injection. So before going to the topic, a brief about me that I am a InfoSec enthusiast, having closely 3.9 years of experience, 3.9 years of experience in industry, and I mostly worked on web application security as well as in infrastructure security, vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, and other aspects as well, DAST, SAST, all of the things. So let's share my screen. So let me know, Vandana, if it is visible.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So what SQL injection is? Before going to the exact content of that, we know what is SQL injection because it is a critical vulnerability rated by US standard and the other standards too. And in a web application security, this is a very important vulnerability and it can be exploited to the extreme level. So, as we don't have much time and SQL injection is a vast topic, we can actually work on hours and hours on this. So, I'll be giving a brief idea what it is, what can be the consequences, what can be the remediation done for it, and how we can actually find out the vulnerability from the application and how we can attack to the database and get the information. So already I have give my basic introduction. This is me, as you can't see me. So here is my pic I have attached, and so let's jump to the topic. So SQL injection is actually a kind of attack where we can insert or inject some kind of malicious query, SQL query, from the input area of application from client side to the server side. So it is actually a kind of injection, and the difference between the other injection attacks, because in top one of WAF's category there are many injection where are about that. It is kind of an injection, but is different from the other injection because here we are actually passing the payloads in form of SQL query. It will be a SQL command that will be injected into the data plane input, and it will execute already present the SQL commands in the database. It will fit into that and it will be executed, and it will communicate with the database in a proper way to fetch the information from the DB so that we can enumerate more and more on that. So when it occurs actually, when we get some input from a untrusted source without some kind of validation. And if the dynamically constructed query is present there, as if the query, SQL query is dynamically constructed, it will be keep on calling every time. And if the input is coming not sanitized properly, then the malicious payloads will be keep on executing there. This is the problem with the implementation level or the development level, so that the SQL injection may occur. And generally, how we find out the SQL injection is we target the input areas of the web application like login field. Then we can find out the search input areas and as well as the website link also, where there will be some parameter or the input fields like called ID or some count. Probably it will take some other inputs, but mostly we'll be considering the integer input because it will be helpful to pass the payloads over there. And from the SQL injection, we can go deeper dive of other vulnerabilities too. Like we can perform the authentication bypass. We can perform some kind of information disclosure attack because there are more types I'll be explaining later. One of them are error based. So in the error, it will be disclosing some of the information too. And in the ultimate level, we can go to the RC also if we can get the skill shell or the WIS shell of the application. So here are the type of the SQL injections. Widely, there are two categories. One is in-band and the blind SQL injection. Inside in-band, we have union-based SQL injection and error-based SQL injection. So union-based is like, it's the very popular type of attack where we can actually give some integration of two select statements. I'll show one query. Suppose this is our attack URL. There one vulnerable parameter is there, that is the artist. I have already one ID and I'm using the union operator and selecting multiple IDs to be executed there and fetching the details from the database. So this is the type of the union based. I'll perform some of the types also here so that we can get more clarity on it, that when we give this kind of queries, how the application behaves. And how the application behaves, that actually tells us the next level what we're going to perform on the application. The next one is the error based one, where we will be getting some of the error and from there we will be extracting the database information. This is the simplest one we can say, but mostly it can be performed on the MS SQL server. And here actually we ask question to the database and we will get the information in an error format. So only we named it as a error based SQL injection. Let's move to the blind SQL injection. This is the bit harder type because here we won't be getting any simple error message to understand that the application is vulnerable or not. So what we can do is like we'll be asking few questions to the database, and it is also divided in two part. How we'll be asking is like Boolean based SQL injection and another is the time based SQL injection. So in the Boolean based SQL injection is also called as the content based SQL injection. There we'll be performing some true false statement queries. We'll be first performing some genuine activities in the application. We'll be expecting some of the response. And suppose we are giving some wrong input to the application. In that case also, application will behave in some other way. We'll compare both the responses and we'll see what are the changes are there. And based on that, we'll determine the application is vulnerable or not. And the next category is the time-based one. In the time-based, we will perform some of the activities or we'll be giving some of the payloads so that the application's response time will be having a proper delay. We'll wait for the delay and we'll see how the application behaves in the browser level, as it is the endpoint to inject the payloads in the vulnerable area. So we'll determine based on that and we'll understand how vulnerable it is to the input area. So I'll give some other types demo also. Like error based, we can see here. If we'll be giving a single quote after the parameter value, it will be coming up with the error. We'll analyze the error and we'll see that how it gonna be exploited next level. And in the boolean based, we have seen the query is given here. So it is 1 and 2 equal to 2. We know 1 is not equal to 2, but 2 is equal to 2. So it will be passed as a true query and it will be coming up some information. Based on that, we'll be going to the next level. And for the time based, we can see that there will be a wait for delay. We'll be giving some of the commands. The very popular one is the sleep command that will make the application to behave in delayed, and we'll understand if it is getting executed, then only the delay is occurring. So it is vulnerable. So this is the target I'm going to take today. Testphp.vulnerable.com. So these are the steps I'll be performing. First, I'll get the default username and password. Then we need to find out the input areas where we can actually insert the things. Then we have to enumerate the input areas. I'll be using two tools, Bob Suite and SQL Map, where we can perform the enumeration or the fuzzing in an easier way and we can get some good details. And I'll show the error-based and union-based SQL injection, how to perform over there. And ultimately, we'll dump that database information. So let's attack. This is the website. This is developed by Akunetics, and the website is using the web server is Apache. The technology of a framework it is used to develop is PHP, and the main concern is the DB server is MySQL. So first, I'm going to the login page of the application. So here it is asking for the username and the password. As it is already a vulnerable platform to learn how we can perform the vulnerabilities, so they have already given the username and password here. So let's try with that first. So probably some other testing is going on the application, but I'll show how to do that one. This is actually will let you log in the application and we'll get some other tabs like artist, disclaimer, and all these things as a logged in user. So I'm gonna give a true query, that is a SQL query, and I'll see if the application let me log into it. Okay, so whenever we're giving this query, the application will let you to log in the application if the application is vulnerable to the SQL injection. Then we can call it as an authentication bypass because we don't have the proper access to the application. We are not the authorized person there and we didn't create our account there. Still, by using some kind of query that is getting executed in the database level and it is letting us to the application to log into the application, that is a kind of authentication bypass we can perform here. Now, if we'll go to the artist page, so this is the main injectable target we'll be taking here to perform. So as I have given the artist ID 1, it is came up with this ID. So let's change this ID to 2. Yes, we can get the second artist, and we can get the third artist as well, and so on. So first I'm gonna performing the error based SQL injection. So how we can do is we can give a single quote as it's a MySQL server. If it's a Oracle server, Oracle DB, we can perform be giving some double quote and some other payloads available already. So yes, it has come up with a error warning message. MySQL fetch array expects parameter 1 to be resource and boolean given is the var with www path, and here we can see that MySQL is the database type that is disclosed here. So once we get to know that what is the database used, then we will try to get the database name, and the payloads are already available to get the more information like tables, columns, data, and everything of the application. So suppose we don't do that. We are not going to exploit considering the error based. We'll go to the union based, how it can be performed. So union select 1, 2, 3. Yes, it is coming with the first artist details from the 1 to 3. Three artist details I have asked for from there. Let's change it to 2. Yes, it came with the second artist details. Now what we can do is like we can give something that is not there, because database doesn't store the ID in form of negative values. So we're going to give a negative value over there and we can see what is going to happen. So by giving the negative value, I got the another details of the artist that is not belongs to this category itself. So I can see I can communicate with the database, and database is reacting or response is coming from the database pretty well, that I can enumerate more and more. So if we're going to the same thing by using burp suite, because sometimes the application won't be that much easier to exploit or to get the vulnerabilities in an optimum level. So we'll be using some backend proxy tool. Burp suite is one kind of proxy tool. There are plenty of proxy tools we can use. So I'm going to use burp suite now. So first let us check that the proxy is configured or not. So yes, it is running. Now I'll go to my browser and I'll see it is working or not. Yes, I have set the proxy to the same host and the port name. Now I'll make the intercept on. Forwarding the request. So this is the error we got in the browser already. Now let's see if we have got the same thing in the proxy tool or not. So we can see this is a request, a GET request we have made as we are trying to fetch some of the information, and this is a response came with 200. Okay. Now we'll see the body of the response. As the same error I am expecting to be coming here. Yes, the same error we can see here. So we understood like that how to use a proxy tool in such a case where we can't enumerate the application direct in the browser. There may be some restriction or some of the client side measurement taken in the browser level also. So we can't enumerate the application in the browser level completely. In that case, in backend, we'll be using the proxy tool to get the information and analyze there more and more. So as I got the second artist ID and the artist name, I'll try to get some more information there. Let's see if I can get the database information. Okay. So if we are not getting directly here in the browser level, we can use SQL map to get the more information of the application. SQL map is a tool that is already having a huge amount of payload to get injected in the application, and it will come up with the data in step by step. So let's move to the SQL map. This is a virtual machine I have. Inside that I have installed Kali Linux, and in Kali Linux SQL map is a default tool which is installed already, easier to use. So let's go there. Yeah. So this is a Python based tool developed, and when we're opening the first interface of the application, we can see the guidelines, how we can use the application, what are the commands we can given, and what can be the possible outcome of the commands or the arguments we'll be developing, that can be visible here. So first I have targeted the URL and I have got this response. As executing these commands are time taking, so I'll already have performed that one and I have the result handy. I'll just explain to you all. So while I'm giving this one to run, skill map already started running its commands and arguments, and we can see that they are trying to detect if any kind of WAF or IPS or IDs is present there or not. Then they found a generic one and targeted farther, and we can see it has shown like they have found also the artist parameter is vulnerable, where they can inject the payloads, and the possible DBMS is MySQL. So to get further that if any other kind of DBMS is present or not, they will do more queries there. So as we know already, it's a vulnerable app. So MySQL is the database. So we are not investing more time on that. We're going to the next level where it has tried with all the types of the SQL injection commands. You can see the Boolean based, then error based, then time based, and finally it tried to get the database names. Yes, it confirmed that the backend database is MySQL. And yes, the technology is also PHP that I have already informed you all. So now we are using the DBS command to get the database names present in the application backend. And it occurred with the database names, available database. There are two database, AccuArt, and the information schema is the entire database structure architecture, we can tell. And next level, once we got the database name, will be the tables present there. So this is the argument I have created and have checked for the tables present over there. And I got the table details. There are 8 tables: artist, cards, HG, featured, and all the things. So among them, most useful will be the users, because we want to know others' details every time. So if I'll get all the details of the users, their username and the password, that will help me to completely compromise the application, a particular account, and from there in deeper level. So let's go to the next step. As we got the table name, now what are the columns present there? We'll be knowing that what are the details of the users are stored in the database. And we have fetched 8 columns: the address, the card details, the email, name, password, etc., etc. Now we're gonna dump all the information all together from the database. And we got it. The ID, the name is test. This is the cart ID. This is the password, username, the phone number, the email, and the address. So here we dumped everything and got the details. We can do the same thing for the other database also. Even whatever the databases are present there, the names, and we can enumerate everything. So finally, we have fetched all these details. These are ultimate motto. And from there, we can go in depth level and we can see how the skill shell works and all. So I'll move to the implication in detail. So we can see already as per the demo, what are the things we have done is like the complete exploitation of the SQL injection may leads to compromise the user account because you got the username and password and you can log in the application. We can get or read the sensitive information like the credentials, some private details as we saw the card ID and all. And we can steal those information and to perform some illegal stuffs. Attacker's motto will be performing some illegal thing, and we can modify the database as well by performing insert, update, and delete. These three tasks we can perform. And if we are getting the admin account details, being a normal user, we can execute the administration operations as well on the database. And we can recover the content of the given file present on the database file system by using some commands to the operating system. So how we can remediate it? The primary difference is the input validation, especially the whitelisting. Why I have mentioned the whitelisting? Because whitelisting is always more acceptable compared to the blacklisting. Because while developing the code, developers may miss some of the things to get blacklisted. Some of the characters probably may be missed, but if you are performing whitelisting, as per our application business requirement, we will be allowing only those kind of characters, those kind of special characters or inputs that will only be required to perform the required action in the application. And next is the prepare statement with parameterized queries. So instead of dynamic queries, if we'll be using the parameterized queries, it will construct the SQL test statement first, then it will ask for the queries. So for the application, it won't be difficult to understand that is written by the developer or passed by the backend, passed by the front end users. So it is another remediation for it. And the stored procedures is already a similar kind of prevention, we can say, like prepared statement along with parameterized queries, because in this case the SQL statements already will be stored and defined in the application. And the next is the escaping user supplied input. If performing the input validation is not a cost effective one, then we can go for the escaping user supplied input, where we'll be using some kind of escaping schema where the inputs that should be escaped as per the standard will be defined. We can use it, is that one to develop the application. And the last one is the least privilege we need to enforce. Suppose we have some three roles in the application: normal user, DB user, admin user or DB user, or a super user. So the admin should have the highest privilege, the super user the next one to control some of the users, and the normal user will be having only control over its own account. So if the privileges are not given properly assigned, then it can be possible that the users can get the details from the admin accounts or some other users details it can read. That shouldn't happen. So there is the additional defense, or the last defense we can provide is the least privilege. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen as I am almost into the session, and I like to take some questions now.
Hi, Paramita.
Hi, Vandana.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one question which was there in the chat. Thank you so much. It was a great session. I'm sure people will reach out to you after the session. And there was one question which was saying, how can we bypass WAF with SQL injection and how we can remediate? So you've given the remediation steps, and if people have more questions on that, they can reach out to you. Apart from that, we also I also shared a cheat sheet with the participants so that they can get more involved in it. They can go back and check what exactly is there in that SQL injection and with WAF bypass sheet. So it has a reference to core rule sets also. So that's going to be useful for them.
Yes, Vandana, as the basic level exploitation I have explained here, and we can see the application is much vulnerable to learn, so that much protection is not required also, because in the basic level exploitation will be expecting the vulnerable will be helping
Right.
application will be helping us to exploit the vulnerability. But yeah, in SQL map
Don't
only
move.
there are arguments present that we can use to bypass the WAF, and it is quite possible also, obviously you can exploit in that level. So I'll try to bring another session on that, and that's the thing.
All right. Thank you so much. What I would like is we would like to invite Aparna for her session, privacy by design, because that's a different and unique topic, and people should know about that, which is very important as we grow with different technologies, with different standards. It's very important to know about how we can embed privacy by design into the system. So over to you, Aparna. Please introduce yourself and then we can get started.
Thank you, Vandana, and thank you, Caroline and Paramita, for the wonderful sessions that you have given and put up the stage for me to go ahead and link to what you have said already. So, we talked about the culture of security. Similar to that, there is a culture of privacy also building up. And security and privacy go very much hand in hand. Without one, the other is not there. So the example which Paramita shown us, that SQL injection, you can change the artist, get the details, you can get the name, email address. If that were happening on a live production database, you would be getting a financial penalty of 2% or 4% of your gross turnover. So that is where the data privacy comes. So I'll just give you my background. I have been working on technology most of the time, and being part of development, product testing. And I was always wondering, in last 1 decade, we have seen so much growth technologically wise. Social media is there, everybody is sharing their personal details. I can know anybody's detail if I go to a social media. So I was interested in the data privacy when it came. So from last 1.5 years, I am into the data privacy, and I'm really interested to and understand how the legal view can be protected, and we can put that design principles into our technology to protect it. Because the way security has grown, privacy is a new area and it's been going on. So with my experience of 16 years, I'm trying to now have this marriage between legal and technology to make sure that both talk to each other and we prevent the breaches that are happening. So the topic that I have is the privacy by design. Let me share the screen. Is it visible? All right. So privacy by design is a topic that I'm going to do, and we will cover what all points that have been as part of the regulations, as well as what we want to understand. But before starting that, since we have the audience from data security, I would like to give some differences of what is security and what is privacy. So security is mainly, keeping your data safe. You have to protect it from malicious intent or unauthorized access or something, and you need to keep maintaining that. Where the privacy starts in that you have to have the entire security in place. That is must for any privacy. And then how you collect the data, what purpose you use it, how you destroy it, how you sell it, all those things comes under data protection. And privacy, when I'm saying privacy, I'm mainly talking about the data privacy here. because we have privacy as a bodily privacy, your communication privacy, and your information privacy. So we will stick to the data privacy in this session. So in the agenda, we will look at the global view of data privacy, why it is being such a name currently and why it is growing. We'll look at the key terms, what are the design principles, and how these principles are linked to the regulations. And we'll also see some case studies which we can see what could have prevented to happen such breaches. So you would have seen the news that many things are coming. So Marriott was hacked and it exposed data of 500 million guests. So the data that was exposed for 500 million guests was a security breach, and the hacker used the data of name, address, phone number, date of birth, email address, and encrypted credit card. So that was a biggest breach in the Marriott history. Then we have Cathay Pacific breach that happened again because of a security reasons, and it had data of 9.4 million people, which also included their passport numbers. Then Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, I think most of you are aware of it. I don't have to tell you why and what happened there. Singapore Health had breach of 1.5 million data. Again, this was because of a security breach that they had, and it was a malware attack on the IT infrastructure. The accused copied the name, the national identifier, gender, race, which is a sensitive information, and date of birth. So there are malicious intent. There will be security breaches that are happening, but when it involves a personal data and the personal data is being used in a wrong way, it will cause your financial risk, your reputational risk, and your business risk. So as Caroline clearly mentioned, that it all relates to money and the value. And if you have a negative press, if you're not able to protect your value, it is going to cause you a business risk. Your business might be lost. You may not be able to sell your products. So why security being there for some time? So why privacy is gaining such importance in the global landscape? So if you see, this is a DLA Piper world map, wherein you can see multiple regulations are coming, which are very strong. GDPR in Europe and UK is the strongest regulation that we have. We have PIPDA in Canada. We have Consumer Data Protection Act coming in California. Something is coming in Brazil. Australia has a high data protection already. We have something in Singapore as well as in India that PDP is coming up. So if you see this landscape, it's all because privacy is a fundamental right, and all the countries are ensuring that the fundamental right of the residents of their countries are protected. And that is where it has financial penalties, somewhere it is criminal penalties also, that if your privacy is breached, you are liable for the losses, as well as you will have to take actions, immediate actions. So this is the landscape which is gaining, and coming soon we will have multiple countries worldwide who are going to have these protections for the privacy as a fundamental right. Moving on, the key terms that I would like to explain before going on to design. What is personal data? Personal data is any information with which you can identify a person, and it can be identified or identifiable. So if I say in this session, we had one person wearing blue shirt and wearing glasses, can I identify a person? In the regulations privacy, it is called a data subject. Or if I have a name, email address, I have already identified that a person. So that is my personal data. Personal data can also be your financial data, it can be your health data, or it can be any other sensitive data. Sensitive data, when it comes, if it is lost or compromised or disclosed, it can result in embarrassment, harm, or unfairness to the individual. So if I have my health information or my sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, my political opinions, if those are compromised, there might be embarrassment to me. So that is my sensitive personal information. So these are the two categories where the data is involved and how you categorize it. Based on the category of the data, you have to take extra caution to protect it. So sensitive data, you may want to encrypt it better. I'm not going into the regulation terminologies here because regulations is a bigger topic and that will take another session, I would say. So I'm going into more details of what is pseudonymization and anonymization from a design perspective. So let's say you have a Excel sheet with name, gender, age, and other information. If you are processing data in such a manner that you cannot attribute that to a specific data subject, then it is called pseudonymous. So if I change the name and just put first initial, so if I have Aparna Pathak, I put AXXPXX. And then I do similar things for other data subjects and use that data, I am still not able to identify a person. But I know what is the logic that I have used, and with that logic, if somebody knows, they will be able to reverse it and then find out who is the data subject. So this process of anonymizing with an indicator or of logic, it's called pseudonymous. Anonymization is when you completely remove that identifier. So instead of AXXPXX, I put everything as XX and then use the gender and age. I will not be able to identify a person. That is when you can say it is an anonymization of the data. And this will be used for your aggregation or any other reporting. So anonymized data does not qualify as a personal data. Even if you have gender and age, but if you cannot identify a person, it is not anonymization. Now processing. So we do say we are processing the personal data. What do we mean by processing? If you read the definition, it says whether or not by automated means. So either you are doing it electronically by automation or even processing manually, paper-based operation, everything comes under processing. Then collection, recording, organization, structuring, storage, adaptation, retrieval, consultation, use, all these things is your processing. So we used to have this saying, phrase which says saying is believing, seeing is believing. Now the next in privacy terms is seeing is processing. If I am able to see somebody's data, it is processed and I need to protect it. But ultimately, why so much importance is coming on processing of the data? Because the data subject is the ultimate owner of the data. Even if I am processing your data, I am not owning it. You are owning the data, and you have all the right to question why you are collecting, what you are processing, how you are destroying, where you are keeping, whom you are sharing. And you also have a right to question and say, stop processing my data, or say, don't process it in future. So that is the reason when we say fundamental right, each data subject needs to know what is happening with their data. So now coming to the principles. So these are the 7 principles by Anne Cavokian, who is a Canadian researcher. She has defined 7 principles. We'll go one by one. But before that, we have this SDLC cycles, which everybody knows. Even Caroline talked about it. Even on requirements phase, design phase, development phase, if you want to stop your bugs and flaws, you have to understand the privacy principles and apply them in each. And when I'm saying why I'm collecting the data, that becomes your requirement. How will I protect the data? And what is the strategy that I'll apply? It becomes a design. When I develop the code, I have to take care of SQL injection. I have to take care of best practices of everything. That is where development comes. While deploying also, I need to ensure that access is not given to random people. These 2 phases I have added myself, saying maintenance and decommission, which most of the time times we ignore it while application is getting decommissioned. What do I do with the data that is already there? Should I delete it, anonymize it, or what do I do? So the maintenance, which is ongoing processing as well as decommission, is becoming important. So let's go and see the principles. These principles have their questions. People are questioning the principles. They have some overlap, but we'll go by it. First says be proactive, not reactive. So as security principles are there that you have to prevent the incidents. In privacy also, you have to anticipate and then prevent the incidents before they happen. Second is privacy as default. Be fair in what you are processing. Be transparent with the data subject. Ensure that you are processing the data for the purpose it was collected and collect the minimum required data for your processing. And when you do it, it is a privacy by default. You have to keep all the settings to the strictest possible thing. So if I'm, today only I was logging into the screen share and trying to see, it says, do I need to share your data with LinkedIn or not? Do I need to give this option what you want? Do you want emails? Do you want anything else? So you have to set all the settings as strictest by default. The next is privacy embedded into design. So when you are designing your IT systems, you have to consider that your business processes and IT should talk to each other, and that should become your core functionality. It should not be because business has a different need, IT have a different need, they are not able to talk to each other, and that's when some functionality of business requirement is missed out. So you need to talk to each other and get that aligned. Give the full functionality, which is a positive sum, not zero sum. So here, business and IT, they need to have a win-win situation without doing trade-offs. So if I have to give a feature of sending a newsletter, but privacy says that you have to give minimum option, you have to give consent options. In that case, you certainly can give newsletters, but then you also give an option to data subject to choose how he wants to collect it. So you have to have full functionality, do not compromise on functionality, but ensure that privacy aspects are taken care and the transparency is given to the data subject. Sorry. The next, as I mentioned, security and privacy go very much hand in hand. And that's where for every phase, you have to have complete security. You have to do the strongest possible access control. You have to have encryption for the personal data, if not for the entire business data. You have to keep logging to know how and when the data is getting accessed, how it is getting processed, and also when it is getting destroyed. Building trust is very important when we have the privacy breaches and other things. So visibility and transparency should be provided to the data subject. They will be able to gain your trust when they know that you are protecting their data to the best possible thing. And in case something malicious happens, at least they are aware that you have taken so many steps and they have given their go-ahead for your processing. Keep it always user-centric. So far we always talk about protecting the environment, but now you have to give the complete control to the data subject for any personal data that we are processing. So now if I link it back to the SDLC cycles, you need to take care of these 7 principles in all the phases that you are doing. So if I have to give the visibility, what is my requirement of visibility, how I'm going to give that visibility, and how I'm going to inform the users at the end of the cycle. So you need to take care of it in every development cycle. Now I'm linking this to the GDPR principles. These GDPR being the strictest regulation so far, each regulation is there, and any supervisory authority of a country, when they are looking at any complaints or the breaches, they are going to look at the principles and saying, how have you aligned your infrastructure or IT or application to these principles? And if you are doing it according to it, what is the assessment that they are going to do? So first one lawful, fairness, and transparent. You have to inform the data subject through the privacy notice. So I'm sure in the last 1 year, you would have received multiple emails. We have updated our privacy notice. Please go and look at it. Till now, I was never going to see what is in the notice, but after joining the privacy team, I have been really looking at what they are processing the data, how they are processing it, and where are they sharing the data, and whom I can reach out if I have any questions. So these are the building blocks of a notice that you want to see. So I can request you to go through the websites, Meet, LinkedIn, or YouTube, or Google, to see how the notice has been given and you are aware of what they are doing. If you have to take a consent of the person, it has to be freely given. In the next slide, we'll talk about consent more. Purpose limitation. So if you are doing any processing, be sure that you are doing it for the purpose. So if I am giving my data to a shopkeeper for giving a bill information to me electronically, they have to use it only for the billing information. They cannot use my phone number to send me SMS. They cannot send me for calls or anything, because they collected it only for the purpose of billing. So always ensure that whatever data is there, it is not used for any other purpose. If the purpose is changing, you again have to go to the first point and inform through notice to the data subject. Collect as required only what is required for the processing. So if I am requiring only your phone number, I don't need to know your age, your gender, or any other thing. We have a habit of collecting more data so that we can use it in future. But with the privacy coming in, it has to be reverse. We have to collect only what is required for the processing. The next principle is accuracy. Each data subject has a right to keep the data accurate at all the time. So if I have given my address to a bank and I know there was a mistake, probably instead of writing 2, I written 3. I should be able to rectify that information either through a online channel, or by calling in to the customer care, or to writing it to somebody. So you have to provide these all options for each personal information that you are collecting from the data subject. The next is storage limitation. If I have collected your data and I know that I will use it only for 1 year, after that I don't need to retain it. So once the purpose is completed, you have to delete the data. You can inform the data subject on how long you are going to keep it and for what purpose. So financial data, if it is there, we have other regulations which say you have to keep data for 7 years or something like that. But we talked about anonymization. If you de-identify a person, you can keep the data longer. So for example, I gave that if you remove the identifier and put it XXX, you don't know whose data it is. That is called anonymization. And anonymous data is not personal, it does not come under regulation. So you can keep the business data for a longer period if you anonymize the personal aspect of it. Otherwise, you need to delete the data after the purpose is accomplished. So you need to have a retention policy, which is a process part of it, but your application should have options to use the business data from archival or anywhere else if it is anonymized. The next is security. I think we are in a group of security, so I don't have to talk about it. You have to follow all the security options that are there to give the best possible security things that we have. So all the privacy enhancing techniques that you have to protect the data and in accordance with the law. So there are regulations which will have differences. Maybe somebody will say, I have to have data retention only for 6 years, not 2 years. So all those things according to the law, you may have to put. Some of the regulations can treat what is sensitive and what is not sensitive. So based on that, the encryption and other strategies will change. Moving on to the consent part. So I'm sure you have seen a lot of places which says, I agree to receive XYZ purpose, and it is auto ticked. And because you don't have time to read the terms and conditions, you just click submit and boom, your data goes wherever it is. So this is an incorrect consent, because I have not been given visibility, I have not been given option that I am actually agreeing to it. You had auto ticked it. How it can be changed when you have a privacy by design? You can give option to the users without any ticked checkboxes. Say, I agree to receive newsletters via email or SMS or mail or by all or by none. So this is the correct option how you will use a consent, because consent should be freely given. It has to be specific for the purpose. It has to be informed, and there has to be a clear affirmative action. So if your action is scrolling down the page, that is affirmative action, or you check the checkbox by that is the one, or you click somewhere else which says I agree to XYZ button, that is the affirmative action. So this is how your consent needs to be taken. Now we'll take some case studies. So these are the live case studies, and there have been communications around it. So we will see what is the issue that has happened here and what is the privacy by design that could have prevented it. So Twitter had recently released a notice or emails to everybody to go and change their password because they had a bug. So it was a technical bug which caused changing the password from encrypted to a readable text. And it was visible for a certain amount of people. But they had said that to prevent it from any other intent of any other users, as a proactive measure, they want all the users to change their password. So what had happened during the maintenance phase of whatever they want to release as a new feature, there was a bug which caused the encryption to fail for few of their users, and the password was readable. So what could have happened in the PVD? They must have taken some actions, but having the strong encryption of any sensitive personal information during the complete life cycle, even if you are deploying a new feature of the existing product or you are doing a new application development. And always minimize the user access. So you have strong admin, you have super user, you have user. So keep these access to the minimum level so that your data and unauthorized exposure is minimized and you can still recover from your breaches. So there was no penalty, nothing. Twitter was able to inform the data subject saying something happened, and they have taken remedial actions, but they are also taking a proactive measure accordingly. And since the GDPR says that you have to inform any breaches to the supervisory authority within 72 hours of its happening, I think this is where all the companies are being informing the data subject if there is a big breach happening. The next case study is from Denmark. Taxa is one of the Uber-like applications. There is a business of that. They had done all the data protection activities that they had, but still they were fined by Denmark DPA because they did not rely on the retention policy. And they had kept the data of 9 million individuals, the phone numbers of them. So what did Taxa do? They had done a data retention policy saying, we will keep your data for 2 years and we will anonymize it, and then business data will be kept for 5 years. They very nicely deleted the name and address of each customer, but they retained the phone number. What they claimed that phone number was used as my account number and it was one of the primary keys. And because it was my account number, I had a legitimate interest to retain it. While authorities denied it, saying you can still use other options of keeping the primary key as separate. So the issue was personal information like phone number was part of the primary key of their database, and they could not delete it for their business reasons. So always define your database in such a way that none of the personal information is part of your keys, which you cannot anonymize or pseudonymize in future. I think the last point I have reiterated multiple times, but always have the personal data separate from the business data so that there is no dependency on it when you want to remove it. The next case study that we have is from Australia. The person refused to use the fingerprint scanner for accessing the buildings. He was refused. He was refusing it, and the employer released him, saying, you cannot work, and he lost his job. So he filed a complaint with TPA, and then company was fined for it, saying, you can't give this option. The issue is the person did not get the transparency, fairness, and right to deny the consent in a true spirit. So as an employment contract, they might have mentioned that your fingerprint scan will be used and something like that. I don't know if it was there. But when you are taking a consent for biometrics, which is a sensitive personal information, you need to ensure that you have alternates also if the person is not giving the consent. So you should take it at a granular level for each process and purpose. It has to be unambiguous, free, and informed. And if somebody is denying the consent, it does not mean that other services are also denied for that. So if I am saying I do not need newsletters, that does not mean that I cannot access this portal for it. So you have to inform the user at the time of collection. So if I'm collecting phone number, at the time of phone number, I need to inform why this is getting collected, how it will be used, and where it will be stored. So fingerprint, biometrics, iris scan, these are the sensitive area wherein it is very important that consent is taken and there is a option for providing a similar service without taking that, or we need to be very clear saying this service will not be provided if you don't give the consent. Okay, so this is all I had for today, and let's design to respect the data privacy along with security because it is important for everyone. So with this, I think I am closing the session, and I would request everybody to embrace the culture of privacy as well as security so that we can protect our data as well as everybody else's data that we are processing and reduce the risk for the organizations. So I'm stopping the sharing and I can take any other questions that you may have.
Just check the chat box for any questions. It was a great session. The case studies were really amazing.
Thank you.
Because when you add the context to something which you actually want to describe, it makes sense because you showed the examples, what has happened, what's going to happen. So this makes really sense. Okay. So we don't have any questions at the moment. If someone wants to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me via LinkedIn. They can send me the link on LinkedIn and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, great. So any last thoughts that you want to let them be with? Any thought-provoking question that you have for them?
I would just request everyone to keep your eyes and ears open and see what data you are processing and see the regulations, how they are changing, and question whenever somebody asks you, can I have your number or email, just question it why you want it. You will see the different answers. You will be amazed to know.
I think for me, I have to be very alert on that then.
It's not email address and phone number, that's just example, but any other data somebody asked, you should know why it has been collected because
Agreed.
every country will have their own regulations now.
Yeah, that's a good point. That we should ask people that when they're asking for any personal details. So just need to make sure that you know what they're going to be using it for, which is a good point. Yeah. It was an amazing session, and I'm sure I'm going to go back and review it once again, because that's going to be helping me with my work, with my things that I'm doing. And I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people who are listening or who are going to listen to, because this webinar is recorded, and this will be on the YouTube live link which we shared it, so anyone can go back and listen to it again. For the presentation links, it will be shared by the presenters, and we will be posting it in the chat box, and we will be posting it via LinkedIn as well, so that you can have the access to the presentations. So thank you so much for everyone for joining the session today. We'll see you this month again. On 23rd, we will have a surprise speaker speaking in, and I'm really excited for him to be on the show with all the girls who will be on the show with us. So stay tuned for that.